Hey gang, I talked about this one briefly during my Sprint Watch vid last week, and if you guys managed to tune in for Friday Fly Day, which I think, man, there was almost one of you on there for a couple minutes on that one. I feel like this one, this speculation, might have legs enough for its own talk, so here we go. Real quick, I'm moving this one over into wild speculation territory because while I feel like it's something that could happen and likely will happen at some point in the future, there's been no indicators that it's happening right now or at CitCon, which is, let's say, dropping in a little under 2 weeks. For those who are new to the channel, my wild speculation vids are where I throw a guess or a speculation at the wall. I don't do this often, and when I do, I typically like it to cross the threshold of a, let's say, 50-50 coin flip. I think we're there now. So what am I talking about? Okay, so for last year's CitCon, the main focus and the big reveal was on base building and to a lesser extent crafting. With 2025 being the year that CIG took a slight step back and focused on stability, especially since this year's show is only going to be 2 hours long, although I wouldn't rule out another, let's say, off-the-cuff Richard Tyre, Chris Roberts talk that runs at least that long on the tail end. The safe bet would be that CIG would focus this year's 2 hours on telling us what progress was made on the big ticket items from last year, base building and engineering, with the suggestion being that they'll be coming in this year, well, 2026. But what if they didn't? Typically, CitCon is used to preview new things coming in the new year, in the near future, rather than rehashing things they already talked about. They usually spend a little bit of time talking about that, but it's more about creating buzz and, whoa, I didn't see that coming moments that'll have content creators such as myself making speculation vids for months afterwards. Having 2 hours to say, you'll be able to make a base with a farm and disco lights probably won't do it. Just talking about what they talked about last year would be a little disappointing for the use of that 2 hours. It's not to say that they won't touch on the progress they've made, and they almost have to talk about engineering and base building again, but I have a new theory about why I think engineering might be taking so long. I've seen a few other content creators kind of dance around the subject, particularly when they're talking about the Gray's Market Shiv and what it might be and what it might mean. And I largely agree with them based on the name alone. I mean, obviously, since I already said a similar thing a couple weeks ago, I don't think they're taking this concept to its logical conclusion, though. And I don't think I did initially. So have I buried the lead enough? Well, okay, so here's the background and the evidence of how I came to this conclusion. There's four, let's say 5 things that I think are pulling together into a clear picture. Well, at least a wildly speculative clear picture for myself. First up is engineering. This is a loop that has been in the oven for a long time. While that makes sense since it'll impact literally every ship in the game, as well as bases, outposts, maybe even stations and LZs to a lesser extent. We know we're going to have repair missions going around cities and things. That's a lot of work to crowbar that tech into, well, everything. It's likely one of the more complicated loops in the game, and making sure it's both complex enough to be interesting, it also needs to be simple enough to be accessible for most of the community. That's a pretty narrow tightrope to walk. They pulled it off with mining and to a lesser degree salvaging, but with the former, it took years to dial it in and we still don't have the entire loop. With engineering, you kind of have to have the whole whale all at once or it's not going to work. Components have to be able to catch on fire. You have to be able to control heat. You have to be able to repair components. Nodes have got to fail and shut off portions of the ship. Damaging components have to impact what the ship can do. You get the idea. While there are elements that can come later, the big ticket parts of engineering have to come up front. It would be like having mining without having any way of collecting the rocks after you blow them up, in other words. But even so, they've been working on at least some aspects of engineering for at least 3 or 4 years now, probably a lot longer. And they've had a pretty good idea of what they wanted it to be and how it would work prior to that. Granted, there have been a number of things, not the least of which being the focus on Squadron 42 and the recent focus on stability, that have sucked up the attention span of the people that would logically be working on the system. But it still seems like we'd have some aspects, some tier 0 version of engineering in the game right now. Unless there was an aspect of it they weren't necessarily telling us about. Some other reason that might have made it exponentially more difficult to implement. So this is certainly part of it. Maelstrom is the system CIG will use not only for procedural destruction of some of the environments and buildings, which, slight tangent here, I still wonder how they're going to actually pull this off in a persistent world MMO, unless you see NPCs out there rebuilding that derelict wall just so a player can come along and blow it up again. But okay, anyways, I digress. Maelstrom, for this argument, is also the system that will allow ships to be broken up into logical parts when they're damaged or more rarely blown up, or if they're cut up by a salvager. To do that, it needs to track all the components in that part of the ship and how they'll impact the functionality of the rest of the ship. For now, just hold that in mind and we'll go to the next piece of possible evidence. CIG has always said that we'll eventually be able to find, for example, a derelict Bengal carrier or something in the verse, and with enough resources, time, and effort, we'll be able to fix it up and get it flying again. The thought was initially that these would be rare and not attributed to your account. You wouldn't own them, in other words, and another org could easily come along, fight you for it, and take it. In last year's CitCon, on top of revealing that we'd not only be able to build small towns out of constructed outposts, much like in Star Wars Galaxies, but we'd be able to procedurally build a full-blown space station. But the crown of that achievement was what was effectively revealed to be a dry dock. We'd be able to actually build our own Bengal, provided we jump through all the, no doubt, epic hoops to get the recipe and resources to build it. Further, we know that we'll gain recipes to build other existing ships in the verse, like the Hornet, just by running missions. And the Pioneer they showed off has the ability to build smaller vessels, and there's a good chance that the Crucible might turn into a specialist in that role, but that's speculation on my part. Now hold that thought in your head as we trundle on. Back in 2019, when Squadron 42 looked like it was knocking at the door, and right before we all locked down for a few years for some unnamed reason that the almighty YouTube algorithm would punish me for mentioning, CIG showed off the gang that'll be operating in the Odin system, at least one of them. And this is the place where we'll be spending the majority of our playthrough entwined with in Squadron 42. One of our main antagonists in that game, outside the looming threat of the Vandal and the corrupt politics that are no doubt kicking around through the Odin system, are the shipjackers. They're pirates. Of course, when myself and pretty much everyone saw this little bit here played in slow-mo, the kit-bashed nature of these ships was obvious. So, no need to keep burying this later. I'll need an excavator to get it out. So where is all this leading? Right here. Yeah, I think CIG will be showing off their version of shipbuilding this year. That's my wild speculation. They've already shown off base building, and I certainly think they'll have a, this is what we've done last year, and this is what you can expect, but that would just be a rehash of last year, and historically, that's not what CitCon's all about. CitCon's about looking forward to the next gee-whiz thing just over the horizon. You look at games like Space Engineers and Starfield, the killer app on both of those games was the ability to build your own ships. The games themselves have dubious gameplay outside of that. And CIG is definitely aware of those games as contemporaries. No doubt true Star Citizen competitors like Elite Dangerous have also eyeballed that tech and have looked for ways to integrate it into their games. Of the ships shown off in the side scroll last year, by far the weirdest one was what I've been jokingly calling the Drake Snail. Of course, that's not what it actually is, but come on, until we have a real name, that's what it is to me. At the time, I speculated that could be a Drake mining ship that would land on a mining node and exploit it, as opposed to flying around and blowing up rocks. They're just laying around on the ground or floating in space. Those nodes are definitely coming sooner or later for the base building aspect of the game, and it would make a lot of sense that there be ships that could eventually exploit those resources without having to build a whole base around them. But there was some disagreement about what this ship was. To me, it obviously looked like the command module of the Caterpillar with Corsair wings slapped on it. But other people were seeing Consolidated Outlands or Argo in some of the shape language. What if we were all correct? What if this thing is a kit bash ship? We already have an example of this in game right now in the Drake Golem, which is kind of a mashup of a mule, cutter, and some connective tissue. It would make sense that they drop pre-kit bash ships on us, along with kind of a shipbuilder in-game that sells them. Initially, what if the engineering loop is taking so long because all these Maelstrom separated parts of ships need to be able to play with other ships? It makes kind of sense, right? Maybe these delays are because there's another hidden loop out there that CIG has been quietly building up to, and that loop, shipbuilding. Not shipbuilding off an existing recipe to make an existing ship, but using the parts of other ships to slap together to make your own ship. Coming up with the rules to govern that kind of system, to balance it in an MMO, to have those ships make sense within the context of the game CIG is trying to make here, yeah, that's gonna take a little bit of time and brain power. Still, I think something of it would have leaked out by now. But then again, I don't know about you, but I didn't hear anyone mentioning the ability to flat out build our own Bengal carrier until CitCon showed that off. Sure, we knew we'd be able to find that derelict, like I said earlier, and get it working, but to make a brand new pristine one? So it wouldn't be the first time CIG pulled off a secret this big. But again, the ability to balance it out, to make sure someone can't make, say, a super fast racer Vanguard with a Perseus turret strapped on the top, that'll take some time to sort of build out the rules. And I'll end this vid with this. Even if this isn't the killer app that CIG shows off this year, I think they'll eventually go this route. Something similar to Starfield Shipbuilder, but the parts would all be ships that we've seen. Buccaneer engines, a Freelancer cargo bay, Argo living quarters. You get the idea. And the bonus would be is that it would give explorers and salvagers another aspect of their loop to do. Someone might be like, I need a Buccaneer engine to complete my ship. And a salvager could be out there and be like, hey, I just found a Buccaneer. I'll just slice off that engine, put it in my cargo bay, and make some money selling it to this guy, and then just eat the rest of the ship. So what do you think? You think I'm way off? You think it's inevitable? Think we'll see it in, let's see, less than 2 weeks? Let me know down below. Until then, catch me next time.